Come check us out every Sunday at 9:30 p.m., where Matt will be playing through his massive backlog of Steam video games, and join in the fun. The game Matt is playing right now is Battlefleet Gothic Armada 2. Hope to see you there.
Hello, Fearless Gamers. Matt here for Fearless Games, and welcome to another episode of The Joy of Painting Minis.
You know when more of these videos come out, hit that little bell icon so YouTube actually tells you when these videos come out, and give this video a like. That way it gets out there and circulates more, and I can also see what content you guys really want to see. This helps me out greatly with deciding what kind of video content to give to you guys, and like I said, it helps out the channel a lot, and we really appreciate it if you could do that. So, with that out of the way, let's continue with the video.
How's it going, everybody? So today we are going to be painting a Dark Reaper from the Aeldari forces, and we're going to be painting him up using the contrast method. We're going to be probably seeing a lot of contrast painting in this series for a while, primarily because this is the armies that aren't going to see a lot of tabletop, so I just want a quick and done paint job, which means we're not going to skimp out and do like a lazy kind of look. We're still going to try and make it look as nice and clean as possible, but we're not going to be going overly crazy about it. And since it's contrast paints, it's going to get done nice and quick with very little effort needed to be done. So let us pop right in and get us going on this project. So we are going to be now first applying the black to this, to the black armor. Since this is a Dark Reaper, Dark Reapers are famous for having either black or a dark purple, and we are going to be going with a more traditional color scheme for this guy. And by traditional, I mean the color schemes that I would have seen in the codexes when I first started playing Eldar, way back in the days of 3rd edition. So, a pseudo-retro look. But not an entirely retro look, because there were some really kind of crazy color schemes going on with the Dark Reapers back in the day. So, let's get our black paint, which we are using Black Legion. This is one of the newer contrast paints, and because of that, it isn't as thin, so it's going to give us it's going to be a little easier to get a nice even coat with this paint, unlike some of the younger contrast color paints. So we're going to take a little bit of paint here, put it on our brush, and like I've said in previous videos, we're going to pick a piece of armor and work from one end all the way up into those joints. So we're going to start on his foot and bring this down and try to avoid any part of his armor that isn't part of his boot. And like I said, this paint, unlike Black Templar, is a little thicker, so while it will flow nicely into all those recesses, it's not going to give us the dramatic shades like Black Templar does, and that's kind of what I'm going for. I use Black Legion for armor when it comes to contrast. Anything that's not supposed to be made out of a hard, soft fabric. I tend to be using the Black Templar paint now for fabrics like leathers or cloths, and I think that's great because it helps also gives a nice distinction. So if you have like a leather belt, but it's a black leather, if it's like a leather belt or a cloth fabric like bandana, but he's wearing black armor, you can use the two different blacks to distinguish between the two, so it doesn't look like they're made out of the same material, which is really great. And this guy is going to be used for a Bealtan themed army, which is why we're going a little retro. Bealtan was the first Eldar army that I committed to painting the paint scheme of. And I actually won an award at an old Rogue Trader event for the army, primarily for the army setup, because it was all Aspect Warriors, Wraith Lord, and back in the day, this was during 3.5, when the Eldar just got a Craft World Codex, which basically gave you an alternate ways to play the Eldar, giving you different options. And what was it? The Uthway, army in the 3.5 Codex basically gave you more slots to run more Farseers and Warlocks, and gave you a new entry for the Guardians called the Black Guardians. And they were slightly different. They were slightly more powerful than a regular Guardian, but not as good as a Dire Avenger, because because their Guardians are supposed to be a little bit tougher, but they're not like Aspect Warrior level. And they had a new entry. The other unit entry was the Seer Council, which basically functioned like the Warlock Conclave does now. It gave you a way to field multiple Warlocks at once, because back in 3rd Ed, Warlocks were counted as an HQ choice, so you can only have a max of 2 of them. So that was like the Uthway's big thing, was that they could have a unit with multiple Warlocks in it. And Iandin, however you wish to pronounce it, I forget what their special thing was. It made Wraithguard troop choices and elites, and it made Wraith Lords heavy support and elites, I believe, was their shtick. So it let them field more of those units, because back in the day, you had a force organization chart, which was compulsory two troops and an HQ, and then you could add up to 6 troop units, giving you a grand total of 6, 3 elites, 3 fast attacks. And I think that was the other difference, was I think it changed how many of the elite slots you could take, so you could have more Wraith Guard. And so back then, if you needed a special army rule that said basically you can break the force organization chart and follow this new fancy force organization chart instead. And what else was there? Samhain, however you pronounce it. Their special one was they swapped out the troop choice for fast attacks. So instead of 3 fast attacks, 6 troops, they could do 3 troops and 6 fast attacks. And I believe bikes counted as troops, and they gave them the Wild Rider Autalk, which famously became the Autalk on a jet bike, which they got rid of, and made the War Counselor, which was basically a special unit of Autalks on bikes. And then there was Altiok, which I forget what their special thing was, but I think it gave them a new version, a modified version of the Rangers, the Pathfinder class, which eventually became an upgrade in like 4th/5th edition to Rangers, and then it became a special unit choice that Illic Nightspear made if he was part of a unit when he was still around. And then for Bealtan, it turned all of the Aspect Warriors into troop choices, and turned all of the troop choices, Guardians, Rangers, into elite choices. And that was the army I picked because I liked running lots of Aspect Warriors. And I also like their paint scheme a lot. The green with the black vines, which I never learned how to paint until just recently, actually. So that's why we're taking a little bit of extra care with these guys, because Bealtan does have a special place in my heart. But it's still going to be done in contrast mode because it takes way less time to get a contrast army done, and I'll very rarely play these units, so as long as they look good on the tabletop, it does not matter. And like I said, this kind of contrast paint really dries very nice and neat, so it makes it a little harder to tell that it's contrast, especially once we're done with this guy. He is going to look really nice and clean, so it'll be hard to tell that he's contrast unless you really look to find the telltale signs like the pooling of paint, which we are going to have at one point. There's just no avoiding that. Like I said, we're not going to stress over when that happens. And that's also why I like using Black Legion for armor, because it doesn't show the pooling as much as Black Templar does. Like Black Templar, I have a very hard time getting it not to pool and splotch. Just checking my test model real quick to see how I painted this part up. And I also, this is probably my favorite pose out of all of the models in this kit. I love the reload motion action on a model. I don't know why, I just think it adds that extra character of like, yeah, these guys do run out of bullets. So I just love that look. And we're trying our best not to get too messy on spots we don't want to be black. However, if we get it on a spot that's not supposed to be black, not the end of the world. We will do a light coat of Gray Sear, which is what we primed this many, to get us back to our neutral color, and then we can fix it up. So we have that option. We want to try to avoid it as much as possible, but we're not going to stress if we have to, because that is how it is, especially when you're working with contrast paints. Just trying to get him so no matter which angle he's looked at, you don't see any gray. Alright. And as I said in the last stream that we did, things have been a little rough here with some personal stuff. Not gonna get into it. Maybe one day I will, but not right now. And it has caused a bit of chaos in our home, making painting very difficult to do, because just stuff going on, dealing with emotions, turmoil, and aftermath. But thankfully, as I said, things have started to settle down a little bit. We're not 100% just yet, but I can start to devote a little bit of time back to painting, which is nice because I love painting. And as I've mentioned in other videos about my burnout, I've still been listening to novels, and it's been driving me nuts, because I sit there and I go, oh yeah, I really, really, really want to paint, and then I don't, and then I listen to more novels, and then I'm just like, I just wish I could be painting. So this is the first time I've painted in almost 2 months, and boy, does it feel nice to finally get back into it. Because I've had this guy sitting on the table for quite some time now, and as I was saying before, another good thing about this particular contrast paint is because of how dark it is. Doing touch-ups after the fact is not as punishing as with like Black Templar is. So I don't have to be... So if I find a spot where I missed it, I don't have to be really precise to avoid causing little splotches, because this paint's a little more forgiving, which I like. I don't know if it's just the pigment or if they just switched up the formula, but whatever they did, this color is so much better than Black Templar. Granted, like I said, Black Templar does have its place, but in a lot of cases, if I can avoid using Black Templar in the future, I most likely am. And gonna clean up some of these little splotches where the gray escaped getting colored. Okay. I also have to get back into the habit of painting on camera, because it's been so long. Doing this with the camera in the way is just annoying. I've been sort of tempted to see about maybe picking up one of those camera glasses, but as far as I'm aware, they don't do full HD resolution yet. They're still like, still like a little box or something. Like, it looks like it's been recorded on a phone. And we're almost done here with the black, and then we can move on to our next color. That's the other good thing about contrast paint, is it dries pretty quickly, especially under these lights. So I don't have to wait too long after I paint a miniature to get on to the next color. Actually, this is kind of funny. At least to me it is. It's been so long since I painted, I forgot that I bought like 5 of these mini holders. This way I could have a whole unit on them. And then the last unit I painted, I never put them on them. And I was like, oh yeah, I have these things. Completely forgot about them. Until this video, actually. I was getting my equipment ready. And then I looked down and I was like, oh yeah. And I was like, why didn't I use these for all of the squad? Okay. So just a little bit of touch up with some grace here. And a little bit of touch up there. And then we just gotta hit his back here. I completely forgot about that part. And actually, the fact that I'm using contrast is the only reason this model is fully assembled. I usually sub-assemble, then paint, and then completely assemble. But since it's contrast, I wanted to make sure there was no seams, and it's easier to just have them all built. Make sure it's painted in the front. This is the only problem with building and then painting, is trying to sneak in to those spots where you can't see it normally, but if someone picked them up and was like, oh, can I see them? You know they'd see that thing, that underpaint, that uncoated part of them. So we gotta make sure it's fixed. Alrighty, and so now our model is basically painted up in the black, so all of his armor is now done. So what we are going to do next is we are going to put him, go through real quick to make sure there's any places that need to be touched up with gray sear. We're going to do that to make the painting a little bit easier. So we are going to use movie magic, and we are back. We have cleaned up all of the stuff that we didn't want to be black, put in a layer of gray sear, so we're back to our default, and cleaned up a few messes that I made, primarily because I got this pole sitting in front of me because of the way my desk works. I can't have it on the other side. Hopefully in the future we'll be able to fix that. So we are now going to go on, and the next color we're going to do is the gun, or the Reaper launcher. So what we are going to be doing it in a purple. The old classic Dark Reapers, like I said, was black and purple. And so you'd either have them in a dark purple armor, or you'd have a purple gun, or some variation of that. But so we are going to try and recreate that old retro feel here from back in 3rd edition. Get a little water on our paint just to help it flow a little better. Move the paint pot out of the way so I don't accidentally hit it, which probably means I will. And let us get started. So like I said, we're only doing the gun, and this one's a little trickier because there's more open spaces, so we're going to try and flow the paint into, as best we can, into these spots to avoid any kind of pooling that could cause a break in the paint film if we accidentally have to go over it again. And here we go. And this was one of those times where I took a chance on the color. I was not confident that this purple would come out good on the for a Dark Reaper, but after seeing it, surprisingly, I'm impressed with how well it actually looks on them. I think this with the black armor, I think they complement each other very well. And it gives like this really, really nice look. So here we're going to try and be a little careful just to avoid so many retouch-ups with Gray Seer. Because like I said, the less we have to do that, the better. Alright, do a quick examination to see if there's any other spots that need to be hit with paint. Okay, so it looks like we are good there. So now once again we are going to take a brief moment here just to make sure everything is nice, and if there's any cleanup that needs to be done we will do that. And here we go. Alrighty, so we have gone over this, made sure everything was painted that needed to be, and we touched up some little tiny areas that needed to be fixed up. So our next color that we are going to be doing is the quote-unquote metal bits. I do quote-unquote because they're not going to look metal at all, but they're going to have a semi-little look to them that maybe could be considered a metallic look, at least according to the official GW painting app. This is the color they use whenever they paint metal with contrast paint, which is Belisarium Gray. So we're gonna take a little bit of our paint, get it on our palette, and then we're going to hit up all the spots that we want to be a metallic color. And I have to say, getting the Aspect Warriors in plastic was such amazing news when I heard about it, because there are some of these kits don't work pretty well in metal, like the Fire Dragons and the Warp Spiders and the Dark Reapers to a degree. The Dark Reapers were probably one of the few one of the two probably worst kits in metal, because they were the most fragile because of the antennas sticking off their back. Those broke pretty easily. So I was not a fan of these guys in metal, which is probably why I only own one set, and all of them are missing their antennas practically. I think only two of them out of the 6 or 5, I forget how many I have, still have their antennas. The rest of them, they'd all broken off. And I tried to fix them, and it just wasn't working, so I just left it without them and said, no one's gonna notice, because, like, again, well, those, I very rarely use Dark Reapers, so I was like, it's not worth the headache trying to fix them up. Don't mind my phone there. They paint this little skull. It's like a little clasp on his little robe there. Paint the end of the missile launcher thing, which again, I love. This is one of the reasons why I love this model. Is, like I said, I love reload poses because I feel it's one of the coolest looking. I feel not really the coolest, but it gives off the most dynamic look in 40K is seeing a dude reload, because I don't know, it just does. That's one of my favorite little poses in these new models, is when they have a dude reloading. If there's a way to model a character to be reloading his weapon, I'm always going to do it. So basically, if you see any kind of kit for an army that I play, and one of the options is to have them reloading their weapon, you can put money down that's the option I'm going to take. Okay, and so now, look up the one glaring detail that needs the gray, and I almost said this was finished without even thinking about it. Okay, and then one last bit up here. Yeah, like I was saying, them getting plastic minis was probably one of the best things that happened to the Eldar, because, like I said, the Aspect Warriors in metal was just a nightmare to work with. They were heavy, clunky, and the contact points were one of the worst I've seen. Out of all of the kits that I put together, the Aspect Warriors were the ones where I was always dreading the... I was always wondering when the arms of the characters were gonna fall off, because they eventually did. My guys are so covered in so much super glue, it's not even funny. So we are now going on to some of the more tinier details. I'm going to be continuing the trend of hitting all of the dark colors first. So, oh, what do you know? I forgot a purple detail, which is his headband. So that's an easy fix. Let's fix that up right now. Okay, there we go. Nice, quick, easy fix. So, next, the color we are going to do is gonna go a little bit different than what the theme. Actually, no, there's one color we can do real quick, which is the green band on his arm. Since one of the things I try to do with a lot of my Aspect Warriors is put at least one dab of color that is part of the craft world they're affiliated with. Primarily because it'll make it easier for me to remember which unit I painted for which army, which, for me, it matters. And it also, I just feel like it makes sense that they would have some way, shape, or form represent the craft world they're a part of. Not all the time. I don't follow this rule with every Aspect Warrior that I paint. But if I have like a detail where I'm just like, I don't know what to paint this, I'll usually default to, oh, what craft world is this guy from? That color will be the one of the army colors. So, like I said, if this was a Bealtan, if this was a Samhain Aspect Warrior, this would be red, blue for Altiok, yellow for Yandon, and so on and so forth. And actually, you'll see that in my my main craft world. That one, what I did was majority of the weapons in the Aspect Warriors are the main color of the craft world, or their ribbons and robes on their army is the main Craft World color. Alrighty, now that that's out of the way, we'll move on to, let's see, can I get away with it on this guy? Yes, I can. I'm going to paint up the few, actually no, because I need this for another thing, so I'll hold off on that. I see that I got a little bit of purple on top of his head, and we are going to be doing the bone color next, so let me quickly tidy that up here. And what's great is a lot of the colors, because Gray Seer is a base paint, just a little quick dab will usually get rid of any and all blemishes from a mistake on the paint job. Now we're going to go on to fixing up, well, coloring up the all the wraith bone on this guy, which is going to be the gun bit, his helmet, these lines on his front, these lines on his back, and these two wraith bone, the Dark Reaper icon, and the little clip that his ammo was attached to. Okay, but we are gonna thin this down because we want the color that we're using, which is Skeleton Horde, to not be super dark. We want it to be, have a hint of color without it being really overpowering. Okay, so we're gonna take this Skeleton Horde, mix it in with our contrast paint medium. So I like to use the medium when I'm thinning down for some sort of effect like this. Yep, I put a little too much in. Let me add just a tiny bit more contrast medium, because I want it to be just the faintest hint of color in there. Enough where in the recesses it will darken, but not enough but on the flat surfaces it'll just mildly tint the paint, the surface. So we'll use this gun right here. And what's great is because we painted all the dark colors first, we can be a little more messy with this color and not have to worry about having to go back and clean up any details, which is nice. Okay, like I said, try to get a nice even coat. Then we're going to hit up this Dark Reaper symbol on this belt. And then his helmet. Beautiful. I was worried I was going to really ruin his eye there, but I managed to do it very cleanly. Then hit up the bits right here. And like I said, because it's surrounded by black paint, we can be a little messy and not have to worry about it. It'll in fact actually help deepen the shadows there. Okay, and then the last bit, which is that clasp on his belt, and there is actually one more bit of detail. I almost forgot about this little piece of his belt. Add a touch more skeleton horde. There we go. There we are. Add a little more to this area. Alrighty. And so there we have it. He's coming along really, really nicely, which, very good. So now this is going to be the really tricky part. We are going to paint his eyes and the buttons on the Reaper launcher and his little plume, tassel, whatever you like to call it. The reason this is going to be tricky is because, well, for the hair and the buttons, it's going to be pretty straightforward. The tricky part is going to be his eyes, because we're going to need to get it really thin down so we can get the effect that I'm looking for, which is a glowing effect. And before, when they used to do the glazes, this was very easy to achieve, because you just hit it up with a glaze, and the glaze did all the work for you. But unfortunately, GW basically kind of gave up on the glazes, and because you can figuring that you can thin down contrast paint pretty well, and it basically does the same thing. But it's one of those tricks where if you don't get it just right, it's going to be rough. So gonna first hit up the bits that need it not to be too thin, because it's supposed to be a nice crisp red. Alrighty. Okay, so now comes the really tricky part, which is gonna be those eye lenses. So, like I said, we're gonna need to get this really thin down so we can get it, or basically we're trying to get a red eye, but really thin in the middle, and just a very subtle effect. So I'm taking another brush I have and really caking in the contrast medium to really thin down this paint. That should be good. And then since, like I said, I want to have enough control over how much effect it is, I am testing my technique on my palette before I attempt it on the model. So here we go. We're just trying to hit there we go. That's exactly what we wanted. A nice subtle effect. We want it to pool into the recesses of his eye. Hey, there we go. So, it's a little too strong in his right eye, but the next step that we're going to do will help with that, which is we're going to be applying a very, very small layer of gray sear to the center of his eye lenses. And when I mean thin, I mean thin. We want it to, we want it to still keep the red. His eye's going to primarily be red, but just in the center, there's going to be a very, very thin layer, thin dab of gray. So I'm going to really water this down. Not too much because I don't want to have, because I want to have control of the paint. But I want to have it be smooth. Okay, a little too thin. Okay, let's zoom in a little bit here. Okay. And so yeah, we are going to be hitting up the dead center of his eye. Be good if the paint wasn't completely dry on the brush here. There we go. And now the other eye. There we go. So see, a nice little subtle effect there. Let's see, I can get them zoomed in. So it helps sell the effect that they're lenses that are glowing, which really, really looks nice on these models. This trick works phenomenal with Space Marines. Yeah, like I said, a little bit of a rant there, but it would have been so much easier if they still had the glazes. But I get it. The contrast paints are such a versatile paint because you thin it down and you don't have to worry about needing a glaze. So we only got a few steps left. We're going to be decorating his spirit stone, and we're going to be hitting up the neck seal with a touch of color, and then we're going to do a few highlights and fix up his base. Now the highlights are 100% optional, but for me, I like it because it helps. I feel like at least One of my feelings on that is with contrast paints, sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes you can help a really splotchy contrast paint with a decent highlight that kind of helps break up the armor pieces and kind of distracts the eye from all of the splotches from the pooling of paint and trying to fix it up with a brush and breaking the skin. And see, so this is, like I said, because it's basically I'm painting black on black, it's not so terrible. Now, if his neck seal was a little more exposed, I would thin this down a little more so you can better see the ridges. This is kind of more like it's a little bit thinner, so it's a little cleaner. It's a little easier to work with to get into those deep crevices, those hard to reach areas. And it'll be a slightly different finish than his armor, giving the illusion that it's like a rubber seal instead of a thick armor plate, which is Wraithbone. Yes, Eldar armor is made of psychosensitive material called Wraithbone. And so there he is. Now, he is practically done. All that's left to do is some what's the word I'm looking for? Highlights. Especially since we have to fix up some of these little areas where the paint rubbed off from me handling the model. So, we are going to do the highlights, which are going to be real simple. First one is going to be a Reaper. Oh, actually, I am sorry. I completely jumped the gun. I gotta still finish up some small fine details, which is the gold on his Spirit Stone. So we'll get our paint here. Thin it down. Then paint up his Spirit Stone. Okay, so now, gonna let that dry. While we wait for that to dry, we are going to add some small details to his base. Which for this, we're going to, because we have a theme going on with all of the bases, which is they're like on this alien planet that has like this weird green glowy moss-like thing underneath a brown cracked earth, or not brown, reddish. Whoops! I mixed it on top of a color that was not completely dry. So, a dry red desert-like effect. So basically, primarily, I love the crackle paint effect that GW has, and I've been trying to find excuses to use it on a mini. And so I was like, you know what? Beeltan is that's gonna be the theme of their base. Which I still have to fix a lot of miniatures that have the old bases. I've been foregoing doing it primarily because I'm like, I don't wanna. I'm not making a big deal. GW always said the official base for your models is the base that it came packed with. All of mine came with 25 millimeters, but now tournaments are a little more serious about it. And I know one day that I'm just going to probably end up playing someone that's not one of my friends who cares. So I figured I might as well get to that. So eventually I already started doing test prints for miniatures to test out new conversion rings to make it easier to get them all base level. And for Eldar, their models are a little all over the place with the new bases. Like Aspect Warriors are 28 mils, Warlocks are 32 mils, but Farseers are still on 25s, Autoks are on 32s, and it's just like, I don't know, if Spirit Seers are 25s, it's like, granted, it's based on what the model comes packed with, because again, that's what they're basically going off of, is whatever the base came with. And Eldar were in this weird state where they didn't change, like, they weren't fully committed to changing the base size of all the models. But then they did, and they were just like, well, they didn't want to repack all the old plastic upgrade models. So, except for the Dire Avengers, I think the Dire Avengers they upgraded. I haven't bought a new Dire Avengers pack in a while, but I assume they now come with 28 mils. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. But so, all of that is done. We can now hit up this gold. We're going to hit it with a contrast paint and use it basically as a shade, where it is going to darken the paint a little bit, but not a whole much. So that's kind of like why the shades haven't been replaced, because while contrast paints can function like a shade, it doesn't do as dramatic a color tone down as shades do. At least that I've noticed. So here, and this color, what color is this? Nasdrag yellow. When contrast paints first came out, this was the quote-unquote gold color. So that's why we're using it. And it gives us a nice little ring around his spirit stone, which I don't know if you guys can see that easily, but it's there. So we're gonna clean this up, and then wait for it to dry for a little few seconds, which looks like it's good. Then we're gonna hit it up with a technical paint, the Spirit Stone Red, which I like these paints. They do a really nice job, and they look pretty darn good on over gold. I still haven't mastered the drag trick you're supposed to do. You're supposed to start in the corner and drag up, and it's supposed to push all of the paint up into the upper corner, giving you a nice little darkened top and lighter bottom. I never get it to work well. I need to really practice on that, but I don't paint often enough for me to get enough practice in. So there we are. So we're just waiting for his base to dry. So while we do that, we are going to do some highlights. Now, like I said, he's a battle ready miniature, so we're not going to go too crazy. We're just going to do a few highlights to help pick out his armor and fix up some mistakes. So there. 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 Okay. Hey, again, this is just to kind of give them a little more definition. And as I said, this can, with contrast paints, sometimes this can help distract the eye a little bit from those big old splotches that you sometimes get on flat surfaces. So trying to find spots that would really benefit from a nice highlight to emphasize the shape of the armor, and just so he doesn't look so flat, which can happen with black sometimes. Okay. Probably over-highlighting him compared to some of his buddies. Yeah, I did over-highlight him. That's alright. But I can go back to the rest of the crew and highlight them where I highlighted this guy. Then this is why always, if you paint a model out of sequence, because usually I paint these guys all at once, it's always good to have them on hand for reference so you can see what you did. Hey, and there we are. So, can I hit up any other spots on these guys? Nope, that's all I did. Alrighty. Just double checking my reference model again for any potential other spots that I may have highlighted. Doesn't look it. Oh, no, there's one other spot that I could hit up with a highlight. Alrighty, now that the black armor has been highlighted, we can move on to the gun, or the Reaper launcher, which for this we're going to be doing a mix, a 1-to-1 mix of white and purple, just to give us a little, like, the purple that I picked for the highlight is just a tad too similar to the, just a tad too similar to the natural highlighted areas that the purple made on the Reaper launcher, so I add a little bit of white to the mix to lighten it up, to help make it appear more like a highlight. And I thankfully have a spot on my palette where I made the original highlights so I can mix it in and see. Okay, so we're just mixing in more of our white, because like I said, this is another tricky part, is it's been a while since I've painted this mini, so there we go. So that's the other big thing that I should do more, which I've started doing, but clearly I gotta remind myself to do it more, is using a wet palette when I'm mixing these non-contrast paints, because in the time it's been since I painted these guys, the wet palette would have kept it good. So we're gonna hit up all of these tiny bumps on his gun. Did I put this highlight anywhere else? No, I did not. So the highlights on the Reaper launcher are done, and then we only have one more highlight left to do, and then we can finish up the base with the crackle paint. So we're going to take our highlight color. Oh, we also have to highlight his hair. So that'll be the last highlight we do, because it's very small. Get a better reference mini. Okay. So, take them off real quick. Get my paint. Hit it with a little bit of water. And here we go. Okay, a little more paint, and now in terms of liking the Aspect Warriors, I'm not really sure. I think Dark Reapers are one of my favorites, because I do like the skull and death motif. But I can't say if they're my absolute favorite. I'm really hard-pressed to say which one that would be. If you looked at the number of miniatures I have, you probably would say it's Striking Scorpions and Dire Avengers. The Striking Scorpions are actually... The reason I have so many of them is because because of the Path of the Eldar books that Gav Thorpe wrote after Path of the Warrior came out, and just having a whole story following a Striking Scorpion. For some reason, I was just in I needed all the Striking Scorpion models after that. So that just shows the power of a good book can have on some of your hobby decisions in this game. For example, the Caiaphas Cain. Now that he's getting a... I've only read one book with him, the first book, and even though I don't play Guard, I want that mini because I just thought that book was great and he's an awesome character. So that was kind of like the deal with the Striking Scorpions. I wouldn't say they're my absolute favorite aspect warrior, but reading about them and how cool they were in the first book in the Path of the Eldar series just made me go, I need more of these guys. So I don't know if I'd say they're my favorite. It's hard to... I can't really think what I would say is my absolute favorite aspect warrior. I'd have to get back to you guys on that because I'm not 100% sure. So we're going to be on to our final highlight, which is the red plume or hair piece that they have here. We're just going to pick out a few little strands to really make the hair detail pop. Okay, so now the final bit of this is going to be applying the crackle paint to his base and then painting the edge of the base itself. So let us get going with painting up the base with a crackle paint. Not 100% sure where my spatula tool ran off to, but thankfully I've got something here. Not ideal, but just as good in my opinion. So we're gonna take a bit, scoop it onto the base.
And with that, the model is complete. All that's left to do is apply transfers and a top coat to match the rest of the army. For this one, we went with a satin varnish from Vallejo. You can check out more images of this model on our Instagram page, link in the description. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, fearless gamers, take care!